Wow. Good afternoon on this gorgeous Southern California day. And I want to first and foremost thank you for joining us today at today's Creating Excellence Forum. My name is Doug Haynes from the Office of Inclusive Excellence, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. And this is just the third in-person event that OIE has hosted this spring. And we have intentionally ensured a large space for your comfort to spread out during this afternoon's program. Before we get started, I realize we're actually on the property of the National Academies. The Beckman Centers is part of the National Academies, but we'd like to be good neighbors, and for that reason, I want to share a land acknowledgement, in part because it recognizes our presence on the ancestral and unceded land of the Gabrielinos and Guañaños Achaman Nation. As a land-grant university, it is vital to acknowledge and make visible UCI's relationship to Native peoples, to recognize and make visible UCI's relationship to Native peoples on the land and where we stand, where we learn, where we work, and where we discover. And to affirm the past, present, and future of the Gabrielinos, as well as the Guañaños Achaman Nation here in this place. And so this acknowledgement is a living narrative and serves as a call to action for all members of the UCI community. Like most events, we have our supporters and sponsors, and I want to use this time to acknowledge the grant from the University of California Office of the President Advancing Faculty Diversity Program. Our project, which we'll describe later, was selected from a system-wide competition. And the aim of our proposal was to enhance the university's commitment to inclusive excellence through yielding, that is to say, successfully recruiting exceptional scholars with demonstrated expertise in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion across the academic enterprise in our arts and humanities, social sciences, social ecology, as well as our STEM fields and health sciences, and of course, our professional schools. Each new faculty member selected was nominated by a respective school dean and provided with funding to translate their program vision to benefit UCI students and inclusive excellence priorities. It's one thing to recognize faculty who have compelling inclusive excellence diversity statements. It's another thing to invest so that they can enact their vision and in the process help redefine the contours of what inclusive excellence means. Because inclusive excellence is a continuum and a dialectic. It changes with time and by people's input into this vision. Last year, we honored 5 of these awardees virtually, and some of them are here today. Cindy Archer from the School of Law, Don Bounds from the Sue and Bill Gross School of Nursing, Gustavo Carlo from the School of Education, Anne-Marie Piper from the Department of Informatics in the Donald Bren School of Information and Computer Sciences, and Julie Washington, also from the School of Education. Today, we honor 5 more Chancellor's Inclusive Excellence awardees who were hired since 2021. These 5 awardees will engage with me in conversation and entertain your questions to share the lessons learned by their award projects. These speakers today, and they're on the stage, include Naomi Chesler, Director and Professor in the Department of Biomedical Engineering at the Henry Samueli School of Engineering, Alexandra Floria, an Assistant Professor of Mathematics in the School of Physical Sciences, Jamila Morgan, an Assistant Professor of Law in the School of Law, and Tara Naputi, an Assistant Professor in the Department of Global and International Studies in our School of Social Sciences. I should add that Tiara is actually in Guam, and so she'll be live streaming her remarks a little later in the program. And finally, Carolina Valdiva Ordorica is an assistant professor in the Department of Criminology, Law, and Society in the School of Social Ecology. And so before turning to our conversation, and this is a conversation with our awardees, but also with you, whether you have questions about what inclusive excellence means and the ways in which these really terrific new colleagues are contributing to it, I just want to underscore you're really encouraged to be a part of the conversation. I want to take a moment also to welcome the many colleagues who join us from several programs to support the university. And I want to list them, but in doing that, I also want them to know how much I appreciate their continued engagement with the Office of Inclusive Excellence. They are Dean Frances Contreras from the School of Education. She is a recent new dean of the school. From the Henry Semela School of Engineering, the Stacy Nichols Dean of Engineering, Magnus Ergestat, who's also recent in joining us, and Chair of the Department of Biomedical Engineering, Zoran Nenadic, from the Donald Bren School of Information Computer Science, Dean Marios Papathemiou, and Chair of the Department of Informatics, Melissa Mazmanian. Interim Dean and Distinguished Professor Brian Garth from the School of Law, from the Sue and Bill Gross School of Nursing, Dean Mark Lazenby, from the School of Social Ecology, Dean John Gould, and Chair of the Department of Criminology, Law, and Society, Mona Lynch. And from the School of Social Sciences, we have both the Dean, Bill Maurer, as well as Eve Darian, the Chair of the Department of Global and International Studies. So there are many people here, and in acknowledge them, I just want to underscore that what we do around inclusive excellence at UCI is really a partnership, both with the general campus and the academic leadership that I listed, and including those who are unable to attend. I also want to acknowledge and welcome leadership from UCI, including our Vice Provost for Academic Personnel, Diane O'Dowd, Vice Chancellors Tom Andriola from Information and Technology and Data, Willie Banks, the Vice Chancellor from Student Affairs, as well as the co-chair of the Black Faculty and Staff Association, Naomi Duke, as well as Associated Graduate Student President Connor Strobel. And so finally, there's a couple of people I want to acknowledge because they really are community partners and supporters of the campus. I want to acknowledge two individuals who've traveled from Northern California, Kathleen and Mark Santora. They're longtime supporters of the campus, proud parents of an alumnus Division I athlete, and just deeply committed and supportive of UCI's growth as a public research institution. And I also want to acknowledge Allison Edwards, who's the executive director from the Orange County Human Relations Commission. And she plays an invaluable role in really being the voice and the conscience for Orange County, which is home to over 3 million people and is highly diverse at the same time. And so I want to end my remarks by calling up our Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor, Hal Stern, to share his remarks.
Thank you, Doug. Welcome, everyone. It's really great to be here. It's a little hard to follow Doug. He says pretty much everything I wanted to say, but that's okay. I'm really honored to be a part of today's event, recognizing the Chancellor's Inclusive Excellence Awardees and helping to be a small part of sharing their work with the community. I will note, as Doug did, that the program is a pilot program that's funded through the Advancing Faculty Diversity Program that's run out of the Office of the President, and thank Doug for his efforts in making the program a reality. The program honors tonight and last year honored 10 different people, as you can see up there, and just want to note what is fairly obvious. They really represent the diversity and excellence of our faculty, both in terms of their diversity, 9 women and a number of individuals from groups that are all too often underrepresented in academia, but also across the campus, as Doug said. That's 10 people. 8 of our 15 schools are represented, which I think is just really fantastic way to make use of this program and its opportunity. The awardees, as you'll hear a little bit, apply their research expertise to a broad range of complex societal problems, from helping parents and teachers examine inclusions in the classroom, supporting Indigenous people, and pioneering new approaches to medical treatments. They contribute to making the world a better place, and for today especially, a more equitable place as well. Congratulations to all of you and to those in the audience as well from last year's program. I look forward to hearing more about the important work that's being done. But I also want to take this opportunity to, again, really thank Doug and mention a couple of other programs coming out of our Office of Inclusive Excellence that I think will be of general interest. The first is the Black Thriving Initiative, which it recognizes and responds to anti-Blackness as a threat to our mission as a public research university. And since it launched 2 years ago, it's had impact in many ways. In particular, we are in the second year of a cluster hiring program. The second year awardees will be announced kind of any day, as soon as the provost gets his act together. So that's a really significant contribution to the environment, and also launched an Inclusive Excellence Term Chair Program. So a lot of different programs, but a Term Chair Program, which is recognizing 5 other colleagues for their contributions in inclusive excellence on campus. And the second program I wanted to highlight is called the Change Program, UCI Change. It's aligned with the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the AAAS. So it's a national program, and it is aiming to advance opportunities and remove barriers to allow us to develop a diverse student, faculty, staff, especially in the STEM fields. And so that's another program that Doug and Diane are working on and leading our campus, and there are different levels of achievement, and we've laid out a program to continue achieving more in that space. So again, Doug, thank you for all of your efforts in these programs and to your staff as well. So let me close by, as Doug did, thanking everyone who is here today. It's really important to me, the campus, our awardees, to have you here supporting us in this in the work that we're doing in this space. Special thanks to folks involved in our BTI External Advisory Board and our UCI OC Alliance for Latin Thriving Initiative, and any of those people who are here today. And then I will stop and basically turn it back over to Doug so he can more formally introduce the awardees and help us learn about their important work. So congratulations to all of you.
Well, today I'm going to be asking the panelists a couple of questions, and that'll be obvious once I get to that point. But I think it's worthwhile just to spend a little bit more time introducing them to you so you know more about their research interests as well as their previous institutions where they received their formal training and or were previous faculty members. So first is Professor Naomi Chesler. As I mentioned earlier, she directs the Edwards Life Sciences Center for Advanced Cardiovascular Technology since July 2020. She served previously as the Vilas Distinguished Achievement Professor and Director of the Vascular Tissues Biomechanics Laboratory at the University of Wisconsin. She earned her master's degree in mechanical engineering at MIT. We've heard of that place. And her doctorate in medical engineering from a joint Harvard University MIT program. And she researches ventricular failure, the most common cause of death in people with cardiovascular disease. Her work examining how to improve cardiovascular health through the integration of mechanical engineering, vascular biology, and imaging tools also creates pathways to the professoriate as training ground for many first-generation students and diverse postdoctoral researchers. It's important to note that we are primarily a research institution and an educational institution. And I think it's particularly sort of gratifying to see such accomplished colleagues who really take that very seriously. Next is Professor Alexandra Floria from the Department of Mathematics and examines analytic number theory. She uses tools from analysis, algebra, and geometry, two courses that I have taken in the 20th century, to study questions about integers and the specific properties of mathematical objects called L functions. She formerly was a RIT assistant professor and NSF fellow at Columbia University. Next is Professor Jamila Morgan, who joined the School of Law in July 2021, and she joined sight unseen through an online recruitment process. So thank you for believing in us. Her research and teaching examine intersections of race, gender, disability, and criminal law and punishment. She formerly was a faculty member at the University of Connecticut and has served as a civil rights litigator at the Abolitionist Law Center and with various initiatives, including as an intern with the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund and as an Arthur Lyman Fellow with the ACLU National Prison Project. She received her BA in political science and a Master's of Arts degree in sociology from a Northern private Stanford, and her JD from Yale Law School. And Professor Tara Naputi joins us from Guam via live stream, was hired also in July 2021. She joined us from the University of Colorado Boulder. Her research focuses on contemporary Chamorro, the indigenous people of Guam and the Mariana Islands, as well as on militarism, colonialism, and indigenous culture and movements. She earned her PhD in communication studies from the University of Texas at Austin, and she is currently a Mellon ACLU scholar and society fellow working with independent organizations in Guam to examine climate change and other issues. And Professor Carolina Valdivia Ordorica examines how various forms of legal and social exclusion impact the lives of immigrant youth and families, including their educational trajectories, mental health, and political participation. This is a particularly relevant area of study, particularly when you consider the sort of exacerbating effects of COVID on vulnerable communities, including undocumented communities. Prior to joining UCI, Dr. Ordorica was a UC President's Postdoctoral Fellow in the Department of Sociology at UCLA. She received a BA in Sociology and Criminology at CSU San Marcos, a master's from San Diego State, and a PhD in Education from Harvard University. So first and foremost, I want to thank you for your patience. But now I want to turn to you, our panelists, and also to you, and I want to start with a couple questions. And you can take them in turn. And so the first question has to do with when you were notified that you were selected as a candidate. You were informed that it was a selection process. But part of the recognition is a $50,000 award for you to use. Hear me now? Okay, good. And so the first question is specifically, how are the projects supported by this award contributing to inclusive excellence at UCI? You're first, Naomi.
Okay, great. So first I want to say what an honor it is to receive this award and what a lovely event this is and how nice it is to be recognized in person. Really appreciate that. So I think there were two main ways in which I envisioned that the award would contribute kind of locally and more broadly, and I'll sort of tackle them in those two ways. So first is my own research. So I am a biomedical engineer. I study cardiovascular disease, and the intersections between cardiovascular disease and health disparities are very significant. and I think many of us would agree that they're under-recognized. And from my perspective, engineering attention to cardiovascular health disparities is really lacking. And I think there's some news cases that maybe we've heard of about medical devices that are sensitive to skin color and give bad data for dark skin. And this is just appalling. There are corrections that we use that are race specific in respiratory tests that are shown to underdiagnose Black illnesses in Black people. So there's a lot of space for engineering attention, and so I am moving my research in that direction. The award is helping me to do that. And so that's my personal research that I'm just very excited to have the opportunity to do. Because it's too preliminary to have major funding, but I can do it with this award. But then there's the other piece, which is, I was brought in as a senior faculty member to direct the center. And so in that role, I have quite a bit of other leverage and visibility, which I am using, and moving the center towards health disparities and seeding pilot projects and funding undergraduate students from underrepresented communities. And then, more broadly, for example, I get invited to give talks on my research, but also on race, engineering, education, and then I, tout this award and UCI and the center, and I hope that I am increasing visibility not only of the problems of cardiovascular health disparities and engineering solutions to them, but also how much UCI is doing in this space and how forward-thinking it is. And that's really why I'm so pleased to have been recruited here.
Wow, thank you so much, Naomi. I really appreciate how you fully embrace joining the faculty, leveraging the center, and raising awareness about health disparities and pursuing research to solve them and provide solutions. Alexandra, you joined the math department, and I'll be curious, I'm sure the audience is curious to know how you sort of envision inclusive excellence, why it matters in math.
Well, thank you very much also for the award. I'm very happy about it. I think inclusive excellence in math, the things that I've been focusing on using this award are increasing the participation, in particular of women. There are very few women in math. For example, in the academic year 2013-2014, 43% of the bachelor's degrees in math were awarded to women. At the doctoral level, only 29% of the PhD degrees in math were awarded to women. And if you look at the faculty level, only 10% of senior faculty in research departments are women. And in fact, there are departments where the percentage is closer to 3 or 4%. So the question is, what is happening? At every level, there are fewer and fewer women in math. And in my experience attending conferences, for example, in number theory, which is my area of study, most of the speakers, if not all of the speakers, are men. So I decided, using these the Excellence Award funds, I decided to put together a conference. And if you could put up the slide, please. I decided to put together a summer school in number theory, which is called ANTEATER 2022. The ANT holds for Analytic Number Theory. It will be held here on the UCI campus between August 1st and August 4th. It will be a 4-day event. And this will be aimed at undergraduates and graduate students, because I think that the highest impact can be achieved if we address the problem at the earlier stages of the pipeline. So we will bring together senior and junior mathematicians, and there will be mini courses. I should say that all the speakers in the conference will be women, all of whom have really remarkable achievements in their fields. So there will be mini courses through which the participants will be introduced to the required background to start research in number theory. There will also be research talks, so the participants can be presented with the latest developments in the field. And there will also be various panels on topics of interest to graduate students. So for example, we will have panels about navigating the academic job market. And we will set aside plenty of time to start new collaborations and build relationships, which I think is very important. So I hope that through this conference, we will be able to create a sense of community in which everyone, and particularly members of underrepresented groups, will feel welcome and will feel that they belong.
Wow, thank you so much for that. And what I particularly appreciate is how you're making the subject more legible and clear to people, that all too often we can become habituated to assuming that mathematicians are male and white. And as a result, we don't really see the funnel effect that Alexandra described of relatively high rates of undergraduate math awardees, and then very, very few as they approach the faculty. Jamila, I'd like to call on you next, because you join us again, sight unseen. But I'm really curious to learn more about how you sort of envision your projects as a member of the law school, which has a very distinctive public reputation in putting public interests at the center rather than the margins of its mission.
Thank you so much. I'm just honored to be on this panel. I'm really inspired by the work that you all are doing and honored to receive this award. So I currently am working on a number of projects that are trying to tackle the problem of police violence in society. I'm particularly interested in understanding the ways that negatively racialized persons, people with disabilities, and also marginalized gender identities are policed in ways that result in physical harms and even death. So I think it goes without saying, perhaps, that we do have a problem with policing and that the law exists to protect all of us, but that in practice, in many ways, the law can underprotect those groups who have traditionally been marginalized, discriminated against, and subordinated in society. And so much of my work is looking at the ways that law, despite the best intentions of the people that are implementing it, whether it's lawyers or policymakers, judges, advocates, that it might still produce inequality, that it might still contribute to certain groups being disproportionately exposed to violence. So my current projects are looking at people with disabilities, by which I mean people with physical disabilities, cognitive disabilities, intellectual and developmental disabilities, and the ways in which, again, they are exposed disproportionately to police violence. I've got 3 different projects going on, and with this incredible funding, I've been able to hire a terrific team of research assistants. So we have a team of 7 of us at the law school. I see my 2 colleagues here. The law school has been an incredibly generative space to think through some of these legal questions, and the students, and of course the funding goes to their salaries, they're helping me canvass the thousands of cases that have to do with police excessive uses of force, which are Fourth Amendment claims, Fourth Amendment to the US Constitution. It's a lot of cases to go through. It's a lot of reading. They're full-time law students, and together we're going through them and trying to understand, again, how inequality is built in to the way that these cases are litigated and decided, and really to find solutions. And so that's the last part of what I think is really so important, and why I'm so honored to receive this award, that the award is helping us identify problems, surface solutions, and work with policymakers, advocates for change, again, centering those groups that are now experiencing the brunt of state violence.
I mean, Jamila really highlights how really distinctive UCI is, and that often institutions are described as ivory towers, detached and removed, but you know, it's pretty clear from the projects you're describing and the others that it's really about using the sort of research, disciplinary understanding methodologies as a way to better understand the contours of problems that are in plain sight, but we can't see. And so it's really, I think, exciting what you're doing. Carolina, would you care to share?
Absolutely, and I will echo everyone. It's really an honor to have received this award and also just to be hearing of all the inspiring work that everyone's doing. I do have a slide in case you're on, but my work is focusing on the experiences of undocumented students and their families, and especially as you mentioned the introductory remarks, over the last few years, undocumented students and their families hostile landscape of enforcement practices expanding, intensifying, but also rising anti-immigrant sentiment. And so my work is really focused on trying to understand the challenges, the barriers that they're experiencing, both at the individual level when it comes to their mental health, and also when we're thinking about their participation across various social institutions. Now that we're thinking about the pandemic. And medical services. And so for one example is looking at capturing the experiences of from lens. And so one way for me, or one way that I did this was that between 2017 and 2019, I conducted interviews with status families to really learn what the unique challenges are that they're experiencing from their own perspective. And of course, I'm continuing that work because a lot of the work that I do is trying to think of research also as a partnership, so that I'm not just taking their stories and running the other way to write my book, which I am writing the book and articles, but I also want to continue building those relationships in the community. And so that brings me to point number 2, and this idea of continuing that partnership with local communities. I frequently do presentations, whether it's as young as elementary school, middle school, high school, university level, with various audiences. So whether it's students themselves or their parents, or personnel, we're working directly with the undocumented students and thinking really creatively about what are some resources that can be provided for students and their families, and what ways can additional harms that are being that families are having to confront on a daily basis. And then last but not least, also thinking about the long-term implications and consequences. So more recently, one of the projects that I've undertaken with funding from this award that's been really helpful, as well as funding from the Rosa Sage Foundation, is thinking through the experiences of families who reunite in the U.S. And oftentimes for families, once somebody's been deported, it's very difficult to try to return to the U.S. legally, and so it's usually done. So whatever challenges we know undocumented folks are experiencing, those are doubled or heightened even more when they have that deportation history. So really thinking about what are the experiences across the spectrum of enforcement and what can be done, especially as educators and working with key stakeholders, policymakers, leverage change. And in all, to me, this has been really meaningful, especially because so many students at UC Irvine identify as members of undocumented and mixed status families. And so part of that work is creating, again, those relationships, those resources for our students and their families, so that they can really thrive when they're here at UCI and want to graduate, and for some of them pursue graduate school. And so it's been really exciting and rewarding work. So definitely very thankful for the award that has allowed me to continue moving that work forward and expand.
Thank you so much. It's so compelling, Caroline, your research, because often what's overlooked is that about 50 or so years ago, the state launched the master plan for higher education that really provided a rationale for expanding access to increase the number of California residents who complete a 4-year education, because California residents are the engine of the future. And one thing that's particularly powerful about this campus is that we've really made a concerted effort to take that seriously, and so to create an ecosystem for all of our students to thrive, both those who are undocumented as well as those who are. And so understanding the real hurdles and challenges that undocumented families and mixed status families experience is particularly important, because we need to understand how can we scaffold so that people can maximize their potential while they're here. So I have another question that I want to ask you, but I also want let the audience know, feel free. We have two mics over there to sort of contribute. Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. Tiara, sight on sound, right.
Hello?
How are you doing?
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, good. Wonderful. Well, I really am so delighted that through the power of modern technology, we're able to connect over thousands of miles. And I really want to learn more about how you, as a Chancellor's Inclusive Excellence awardee, is conceiving of, using, and enacting the support for various projects.
Sure. Well, buenas and hafade. Greetings from Guahan or Guam, as you heard. I am zooming in from a Pacific island designated as a U.S. unincorporated territory. And my project with the Chancellor's Inclusive Excellence Award is about continuing to deepen relationships, really. At the heart of it, it's continuing to deepen relationships with Indigenous peoples here in the Pacific and across the Pacific Ocean, of course, to where you all are now in the lands of the Ashaman and the Tongva peoples, who continue to hold and strong cultural, spiritual, and physical ties where most of us live and work at UCI, although I'm doing that remotely now. As a Pacific Islander, I'm influenced by those commitments to place, and my project in deepening these relationships to place and contributing to inclusive excellence, like those pillars of the idea of great partners, to realize what connects us. And as you might see in my background is water. Water certainly connects us, the ocean. What is happening here in the Pacific Islands as part of my research about focusing on the militarization of our lands in Guam is absolutely threatening and concerning the climate issues that we're facing as a global population. So the issues of the Pacific Islands enduring the unprecedented climate threats that impact our resources, the militarization of our lands that impact our fresh water supply, and the fact that we're coming from a U.S. colony that has decision-making power over our lands and lives. So in that way, being considered a territory and a project, even though it seems like it's really far away, it's an issue of global dimensions that we should all be caring about. And I'm thrilled to bring this work to UCI in the coming year to continue these partnerships with local organizations. And so I'll give an example. One of the local organizations that serves our Pacific Islander communities and works to deepen those relationships with Asian American and Pacific Islander populations in LA County and in Southern California. We're working together to plan out and to map out a summer institute that would hopefully be a sustaining event that could continue to center Pacific Islander culture and social justice as part of leadership. And of course, to host that on UCI's campus, to involve UCI potential students and to kind of make sure that that pipeline is seen. Because as we know, ANAPISI serving institution, that acronym is quite long. It includes Asian American, Pacific Islander, Native American, and it's an institution that, a designation that's very important, but oftentimes what gets kind of mixed into that is a difficulty to understand really what those demographics look like when we take that data. And so it's important as one way to think about centering those relationships and the communities, not just in Orange County, but I'm also, of course, excited about bringing the research aspects into the teaching. So in the fall, in the Department of Global and International Studies, I'll be teaching a class on global indigeneity, which will open up, extra possibilities for us to continue these focus elements on place and understanding the places of UCI. I forgot I was in charge of sharing my screen to show you a slide. So let me go ahead and show you something else, just to kind of give an example of what we're doing here now. So, the issues here are about colonization and militarization, and of course, drawing connections. So in the top right corner is an image from a recent action that happened with the organization Independent Guahan, educating people about the island's political status and thinking about issues of climate justice and how we can sustain ourselves and have a different kind of future, one that we can choose our political status as a peoples. And of course, that connects with other places. So Lynette Lahalam in the front right top corner image, if you can see it there, is our phrase in the Chamorro language, which is the version of translation for water is life that you might have heard from other indigenous populations from Standing Rock and other groups talking in the continental US from the Native American issues dealing with water, but also Olakaiwai, which is the Native Hawaiian way of saying to protect the water. Water is life. Since a lot of these issues that we're facing in the Pacific connect, of course, not just to other parts of indigenous lands in the sort of continental US, but of course, we might think about that in California. So I wanted to share that to show people in place and to also just to help expand a little bit more on what it is that I'm doing. We have a lot of things in the works, and some of those things are remote right now, but I'm really thrilled and excited and honored to be awarded this opportunity to be able to showcase what happens globally is just as important to what's happening locally. The water is connecting us. I'm on one side of the Pacific from you all right now, but when we get back together, I'm really excited to think through these challenges and also the pressing issues of our time from an interdisciplinary and the global perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate it, and thank you for joining us. And Tara made a reference to an acronym in ANAPISI that stands for Asian American, Native American Pacific Islander Serving Institution. And what's really worthwhile to consider is that the number of elite research institutions, public or private, that have it is very small. And UCI is among a handful. And it really imposes on us a real responsibility, right, to serve. And so what Tara is doing is so important in enacting that sort of designation. But she also points out as well that there's things that we can do here, right, including this really exciting conference you're planning once you return. And I hope that'll be before the fall. In any case, right now I want to turn to a second question, and it's open to any of you who are brave enough to answer it in front of the Provost Stern, who's right there. And it has to do with our strategic plan. And so most of you probably are aware that in 2016, the campus, after considerable consultation, launched a strategic plan. Our story, a narrative, a set of priorities entitled Bright Past, Brilliant Future. And currently right now, across the campus, there's active deliberations about refreshing it, right? And so with that in mind, my question is this. As the campus updates its strategic plan, what strategies and opportunities would you recommend for UCI to increase its campus capacity for inclusive excellence, right? And so, any volunteers?
So I can make a comment.
Please.
I think that one of the reasons that I moved here, was recruited here, or accepted in any case, was because at my prior institution I had been doing my research and my teaching and my service, as any professional does, especially any academic. And I put it kind of over here, you know, and over here I have my diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I felt like at UCI I really had the opportunity to merge them in a really meaningful way and bring them together. And I see it as an opportunity to bring research to diversity, equity, and inclusion from the physical sciences. So I mean, like, this was probably obvious if you're in the social sciences, maybe, but over in the physical sciences and I guess engineering, we often feel like we are independent of that, like that diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that we might do, but it doesn't necessarily have to inform our research. And maybe we work on getting more students, but that doesn't mean that our science is informed by that. And so I'm very excited to direct my engineering research towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that that's sort of a novel avenue for many that would. And it's not just because my research is in medicine and can do that. I mean, it's also that the more we do that, the more underrepresented, racially minoritized students we will bring in because they will share our passion for those questions and those solutions. So I view it as sort of, yes, we have our research questions, but we're also diversifying the student body, or if we were to recruit new faculty in that area, we would recruit the faculty in that area. It's just naturally going to draw in more people who share that passion. So maybe that only applies to, disciplines who traditionally don't consider race and equity, but I do feel like it is a underexplored avenue.
Wow. Other contributions?
I would echo what you said, Naomi, if I may. One of the big pulls for me too, Irvine, was the fact that I didn't have to separate my research from a very extensive set of concerns with respect to social justice. So at the law school, as you noted, there's opportunities for students to think critically about some of the pressing social justice issues of our day and use law as one of many tools of thinking about how to remedy that. I think to the question of sort of increasing our capacity, I think that we should think critically about bringing in scholars who are critical of their own disciplines, right? And some of these silos that are created between what is considered research, credible, respectable, if you will, rigorous research, and what is considered concerns of communities that have long been marginalized within society, just to speak at the highest level of generality to be inclusive. I also think that increasing our capacity means looking to our students and what their needs are for inclusive education. I'm working with a number of students that identify as students with disabilities. The work that they're doing is incredible, I think, across all of our disciplines to help us think through how to create an inclusive space that recognizes accommodations, that recognizes unique and diverse ways of learning. And so it's really inspiring to come to a place where, again, those interests don't have to be separated in the classroom as a scholar.
Sarah, I notice you're nodding. Would you like to share?
I just wish I was in the room. Yes, sure, I can chime in. Thank you for that. I would agree with several of the things that have been said by the panelists and wish I could be sharing space with you all. I just wanted to add the thing that kind of excited me. I learned that in the fall, this past fall, 2021, UCI saw the largest number of incoming American Indian first-year students of any UC campus, from what I understand. And that was like 40% of all incoming American Indian students in the UC system came to UCI. And so I think, if we think about that, and, even if I'm incorrect on the statistics, I think that's an exciting thing to add into our thinking about what it means to think about capacity for inclusive excellence. And then in that excitement to also go back to that deepening relationships idea, which is that there's recruitment, and then there's a need to make sure that we have support. And in my learning about the history of the university and the different organizations, I've been really privileged to have conversations remotely with my Native American and Indigenous faculty and staff at UCI, who've told me some of the history of UCI's support and expressed that we actually need to continue to revamp that support, to deepen our relationships with local tribal communities. The land acknowledgement is appreciated, and we can do so much more. We can put additional resources and curate relationships with communities so that as these students arriving on campus get here, they also have the cultural support, they have a space, they have a dedicated staff. And I know some of those things have existed in different ways, but have really, a need for additional resources and action. And I think actively working in those communities really will strengthen us all, because I'm keen to build those relationships back up again in concert with folks who have done that important work before. I'm always guided by those who come before me. And I think that that's another thing that we could do in collaboration with the other things that have already been mentioned to continue to thrive and have excellent futures for everyone.
Thank you. And thank you for reminding us about the attraction to UCI by a record number of American Indian students who want to come to UCI for their 4-year experience. I just think that's very powerful, and we need to build on that, leverage that. I also just want to remind folks, don't be shy if you have questions or comments. There are mics there. But any other comments from panelists about the strategic plan? Would you like, the university to organize itself around your department, or?
I can make a few comments. So I think UCI is already investing heavily in increasing diversity and gender representation, which is wonderful. And one thing that I'm particularly interested in and that has affected me is supporting working parents. So I think UCI has a wonderful benefits package, and for example, I think faculty have a year-long paternity leave, which is great, but I think there are other things that could be done. In particular, finding affordable childcare on campus could still be a challenge. Although there are some affiliated childcare centers on campus, it's usually pretty difficult to find a spot. So I think that definitely focusing a bit more on that side could bring in new faculty who are affected by this. And another aspect is regards, for example, researchers who are traveling to conferences and who need childcare. So, for example, when organizing this conference that I mentioned before, we have one speaker, she's one of the mini course leaders actually, who had to go through a lot of planning before accepting our invitation, and I'm very happy she did. The reason she had to do a lot of planning is because there are no childcare opportunities when she comes to the conference. So it was way more difficult for her to accept. And I think in general, this affects women disproportionately. And I think in practice, women turn down a lot of invitations, which can limit their career opportunities. So I think if UCI invested more on this side of the problem, it would have a high impact, not only for faculty who are working here, but also for incoming visiting researchers, for example. So yeah, I think this would be a good thing to focus on.
I think it's an excellent sort of set of observations, because in some sense, it can limit our capacity to be a destination, a global destination for scholars. And so absolutely, already, we have a network of daycare centers, but there's just so much demand, right? And relatively few slots. And while we have support for faculty to go to conferences, should they have children and need childcare, what you just described, Alexandra, is really a blind spot, right? Welcoming people to UCI. So that's definitely something that's worth considering, and because it can affect ultimately who we cultivate, who we can recruit, who we can yield. Right? Yes, Kathleen, would you like to? That's an excellent question, Kathleen. And the short answer is, I think yes, in the sense that while we have 5 childcare centers on campus, there's about 50,000 students. The childcare centers accommodate not just career staff, employees, and faculty employees, but also undergraduates and graduate students. And so, yes, it can be a limiting factor for those that do have families or starting families while they're here. And I think when you look in the city of Irvine, there's a bit more capacity, but I think by far most people would like to be able to have their child in the center at UCI. And so, yes, I think it can be a limiting factor for both our students and staff. Oh. I see Willie Banks and then Diana Dowd.
Hi, Good afternoon. I just want to say Willie Banks, I'm Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, and I just want to say congratulations to each of you because each of your stories and what you're working on are so inspiring. And so it's not a question, more of a comment and also a pitch to you, is to get in touch with me because I think I actually have connections for each of you to work with our students in either some of our centers that are already established, but we are also embarking on looking at establishing a disability justice center on campus and then also an Asian Pacific Islander resource center to complement our already existing centers. And then as I was listening to all of you, I actually thought of a million different ideas for you to be involved with our centers through student affairs, but then more importantly, to have context and also contacts with our students. Because I think one of the most important things for us as an institution is that our students need to see all of you and what you're doing and the research, but then also connecting the work of student affairs to academic affairs. So I just wanted to share that you all have inspired me. I will try to reach out to you and get cards in my emails, but I do think that there's a unique opportunity for each of you to have a role within student affairs and to work with our students. So I just wanted to say that. And kudos to Doug for and the Office of Inclusive Excellence for actually having this event because this is much, I mean, nothing wrong with Zoom, but this is much more rich. So I just appreciate this.
I'm hurt. Zoom is hurt. Diane O'Dowd.
Yeah, I just want to thank you so much for the work you're doing. And Alexandra, I was wondering, in your description of your conference, did you consider or would you consider in the future offering opportunities for either support or funding or providing daycare opportunities at the conference that would allow people to come in a way that they couldn't otherwise?
Yeah, I think that is a wonderful question, and I would love to be able to offer childcare options to participants. So actually, we are having this speaker who is coming with her whole family, and she has to pay out of pocket for her family because currently the funds that we have available do not allow for childcare expenses. And I've had this experience as well, where I have to pay for childcare when I travel to conferences, and in practice, this really limits you, limit your choices, your options. So I would love to be able in the future to offer some kind of childcare support for students or for speakers or for any participant who wishes to come. I think that would be wonderful.
Sorry,
There's
I had
a
a
final
question.
question.
Okay, so I don't quite know how to word this, but this is just kind of for any of you guys. Regarding, especially, I don't know, just like things in the LGBTQ plus community, and like, for example, bathrooms, and like with law too. Do you think like you guys or someone you know like would, I don't know, like make a case against like having all gender restrooms like become a legal thing, at least statewide, but maybe eventually nationwide? Like, is that like something that has crossed the mind, I guess? I don't know, I'm just, yeah.
Jamila, did you?
Well, it's really an awesome question, Amelia. I think that there are a number of law schools that are interested in this issue and students on our campus that are advocating on behalf of trans communities, and in particular this issue that is a hot button issue. I think law has a role to play, and we're a part of a community that's thinking through how to protect the rights of trans people. So it's a good question, and thank you for asking it.
Indeed, it is a good question because over the past 2 decades, there's been heightened awareness to making the campus more supportive for members of the transgender and gender non-binary community. And just one expression of that is what you mentioned, access to facilities. And so increasingly across the campus, we are converting existing binary facilities into gender inclusive lockable facilities. It's still a work in progress, but I think it's particularly important that we do this here because across the country, the receptivity, the support for members of the transgender non-binary community is very uneven, just to put it euphemistically, right? But now what I'd like to do is turn to the close. I want to thank all of our speakers and members of our audience for joining us today for Creating Excellence Forum. As noted in your program, we have many individuals to thank for support for the program thus far, but we also want to request your support as well to continue this valuable capacity building effort at UCI. And so please scan the QR code or use the link provided in your printed program to give and to help transform the curriculum, teaching approaches, and public service to advance inclusion. Now, if I don't do this, I'll be reminded that I should have. I want to remind you about a few exciting events that are taking place in the remainder of the spring quarter. You have flyers at the registration table, but I just want to sort of flag them. Join us in May to hear brief TED-style talks from project heads and leaders as part of our Building Community to Confront Extremism. This is scheduled for May 12th. The forum is from 4 to 6 p.m. in the UCI Student Center. It includes a public reception and talk about strategies to address impacts of COVID-19 circumstances by enhancing community ties. It's free and open to the public. Please join us because there are many talented people who were funded through this program, and I think they will offer some fairly compelling insights on how we can grow together. Next, I want to encourage you to participate in our Black Thriving modules. We have a suite of courses lasting 5 weeks that are open to all students, undergraduates, graduate students, staff and faculty, alums, and community members that focus on anti-Blackness in the United States. And so we are scheduled to have a new course enrollment for May 3rd with the focus on change the culture through professional, institutional, and personal accountability. And those, it's Tuesdays from 3 to 4. You can check our website for more information about how to register. And finally, I just want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for allowing us to host this event, for joining it and making it possible, for acknowledging our terrific new colleagues who are true representatives of inclusive excellence. And now I look forward to us to continue working together. And as we part, I hope you avail yourselves of the refreshments that are still out there. We can allow ourselves some sweets tonight. It's a late day, but thank you.